Welcome to Q&A Friday. Today's question is a bit of a sticky one, so it's getting a video all to itself, and the other questions will be on subsequent videos. So today's question is, am I too big for my horse? This is a viewer question and probably something that's run through your head at some stage in your riding career. Occasionally it pops up when I'm at dressage, and a lot more rarely when I'm coaching. And it's a good thing. I think people have a general sense of when the balance isn't right on their horse, and that idea that they might be too heavy for this particular pony. So since it's a sticky one, I did some research and the results were interesting. I couldn't find anything cut and dry, and I looked in the UK, the United States and Australia. So there was nothing that really said, this is the limit, this is what, you must not be over this ratio, you must not be over this percent, your horse must be smaller than this or bigger than that, and so on. So in terms of percentage, I looked at vet reports and then the rule books from Australia, the UK and the United States. And definitely the rule books were different depending on the sport, but the general gist was all the same. The veterinary research was interesting. One of the overarching reports said that initially vet research started at 10%, so rider weight as 10% of the horse's weight. And this research came out of the UK. But once they realised what the implications of that ratio were, they went on to investigate higher amounts, so greater rider weights. So definitely in the UK they suggest around 20%, and the United States, from many sources, veterinary, military, and the rule book. The rule book never states it cut and dry, but certainly research states around 20%. However, that's scientific research, whereas there are more, in the US they have where you can rent a horse. Their limit is 200 pounds, which is 90 kilos. So that doesn't really it didn't go into state what size the horses were. It just stated that maximum rider weight was 90 kilos. So one makes assumptions about the types of horses that are in stables where you can rent a horse. So the upper limit in the research that I found was 30%. However, there was a really strong indication of the type of work that the horses or ponies were undertaking if they were carrying 30% of their body weight. And that type of work was really slow work. In particular, it looked at pony rides on UK beaches, and sometimes they are donkey rides. And in those instances, sometimes the weight did get up to 30%. However, those rides were very short and they were only ever at walk. So the research deemed that was okay. Getting back to the national federations, that the national federations do not put, that there is no number in the book. So I can't find 20%, I can't find 10, I can't find 30. But it does, in each of the rule books, it does state that the rider weight should be appropriate and suitable for the horse. So that leaves it open to interpretation. Each person might have a different interpretation. However, from a dressage point of view, we are trying to embody grace and harmony and elegance and balance and power. And really, if you've got a rider whose weight is getting up into the higher percentages, there's less chance that the horse is going to be elegant and graceful, and there's not going to be quite as much harmony and balance and power in the combination. So for me, yes, you definitely do have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but you are aiming for, when you look at a horse and rider combination, it should be beautiful and it should be easy to watch. And that really, for me, is that's my biggest indicator. If something isn't beautiful or easy to watch, then you start to break that down and say why. So if we unpack that one, we want to be able to be the most graceful, or be the most harmonious, or be the most balanced combination. And in treating ourselves as athletes, which anyone who rides regularly should be moving their consciousness into that athlete mindset. And it doesn't have to be at a high level, but certainly you would need to take in considerations that athletes do. So and then you can start influencing the power and influencing the balance, and become a graceful, elegant, easy image, easy picture for onlookers to watch. And even though we're not necessarily doing it for an audience, that's one thing to take into account as a point of judgment. And of course, the other thing to consider, which most of the research mentioned, was the condition of the horse or pony. Is this pony in good condition? Does it have good weight? How's its top line? Does it have a nice muscle along its top line? And are all the muscles of the horse appropriately built, well built? There's how has its development been? It also indicates that young horses should definitely not be have to carry heavy weight. So you would expect that the rider of a young horse to be a lot smaller than the rider of a young pony, rather, to be of a lighter weight than the rider of a more mature pony. Also mentioned in the research was the higher rate of injury and potential for breaking down of a horse that carries more weight than necessary, or greater than 20%. So that's another thing to consider. If there's a heavy rider on a smaller pony, the pony might not last as long. If this is a long-term journey and you're selecting a pony whose weight is not appropriate for your weight, then you are going to be looking at a shorter career for that pony. You are probably going to look at leg injuries, and leg injuries in the long term and back injuries in the short term. So that's another thing to take into consideration. The short answer is 20%. So a rider should be no more than 20% of the horse's weight. So if that's a 500 kilo horse, I think that's about 150 kilos. If you've got a pony of 300 kilos, then no more than 60 kilos. And don't forget, that includes tack. So you've got to take into account the weight of your saddle, the bridle, and any other gear you're carrying. I hope that's helped as a guide for some of you in terms of your horse or pony. The context of the question was that the viewer had a pony that she wanted to put in work so that when her nieces and nephews visited at Christmas time, the pony was, had a bit of work and wasn't going to be too wild. And I also have another student who has also put that question to me in the same context. She has grandchildren and wants to keep a pony going periodically for her grandchildren. And I suppose in both of those contexts, the weight might be on the limit, it might be slightly over the limit. I don't know the individual ponies that well. However, it's also for a short period of time, and also I imagine I would expect the work to be fairly minimal. And also both of the ponies in question in this context, they were older ponies, so they've had a whole career and time to build top line and muscles. So in this instance, I would say, in those contexts, I would say that's okay, but definitely take it on a case-by-case basis if there's some doubt. And of course, if you've got questions, then I would refer you to your local vet for advice. I hope this sticky question has helped you in some way, and if you want more information, then I suggest you start at the local vet and go from there. Otherwise, you can just do what I did and ask Google, but make sure that you check the references of the results so that you're getting a quality piece of information and not just some conjecture. All right, thanks for listening. The next questions for today's Q&A Friday will be on a separate video. If you like the video, don't forget to do a thumbs up, and you could also subscribe to the little button down. There's a turquoise button down in the bottom right corner. Click on that, subscribe to this channel, and you'll get more updates every week.